Joe, I think the other speakers didn't get the memo of the required upfront beanies, but I'm happy you obliged. We just got a compliment from fashionista Roger Berman, so I think we're doing well here.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael.
First, congratulations. Recent huge exit. OpenGov, one of 5 unicorns you started.
Thank you. That's good news this week.
And in a time when a lot of deals aren't happening, so extra exciting.
Well, thanks to Lena Khan, I think it was the biggest software VC-backed exit since 2021 because you blocked the other big ones. So that was great.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get a few others over the line.
That was good. That was, as you know, that was a mission-driven company. So we actually started the nonprofit and then realized we needed the for-profit to actually attract the right engineers and talent to build this, and ended up helping 2,000 governments. So it's fun when you can make money doing something that's pretty helpful.
Amazing. And so just setting the table here, the title for our session and the title of your podcast is American Optimist. So are you optimistic about America?
Well, yes, I know. Listen, I mean, as an entrepreneur, what you do is you look for gaps in the world. You say, this is really broken versus what it could be. And I love America. A lot of things are working well in America. A lot of things are really broken compared to what we all know they could be. And I'm very optimistic, especially in the last year. There's been a lot of nonsense in our country where we have a lot of things that broke. Our universities kind of went off the rails, as we've seen more obviously recently from a lot of people. Our media institutions have been conquered by people who, unfortunately, they've had a really tough time. I think there's a lot of envy. I think they're basically, if they're contacting an entrepreneur, they're trying to attack you at this point, and then it's kind of rotten. Our cities are overrun with these crazy ideologies that are leading to all sorts of problems. So you can go through a lot of great American companies are failing in different ways and not focusing on substance. And so on one hand, that sounds like there's all these bad things. On the other hand, there's good answers to each one of these things. Each one of these things, each one of these gaps, if you approach them with substance and you approach them where the best ideas can win with competent people, there's all these opportunities to fix things. And I'm seeing a lot of my entrepreneurial friends wake up, take their head out of the sand, stop going along with nonsense, and actually focusing on making America work. So I'm very bullish.
Amazing. And so, is there something you do to keep that optimism? I mean, is there a daily habit, a ritual? Just, there's all these problems, and how do you it's something I admire about you, actually, just keeping that optimism.
Oh, I appreciate it. I mean, you and I both are working in really competent organizations, right? And you go to work and you work with other great entrepreneurs and you see what they're accomplishing and you see that it's possible. I mean, we live near Elon in Austin, and watching what's possible with SpaceX and what they've achieved, watching what's possible with our portfolio companies is so fun. We're working with people who are saving thousands of lives, right? And with this new bioinfrastructure and all sorts of new therapies. And so I think just seeing what's possible with AI now, seeing how it's addressing these things, it's obvious that we can win. And I do a lot of policy work as well, and I think there's a lot of things. It's not about left or right. It's about competent versus incompetent. And listen, there's some really tough battles, but as more of my friends succeed and then more of them step up to this, I know we're going to be able to do it.
So let's double click on you have a cornucopia of companies you've both started, invested in. Probably most famously, at least one of them is co-founder of Palantir, invested in doing incredible things in the defense sector. Talk about the importance of innovation in defense.
This is a fun one for me. We were seen as kind of crazy to start doing defense again in 2015, 2016. We were seen as crazy. We're trying to raise money for Palantir going around Sand Hill Road. It's basically why aren't you guys doing Web 2.0? You're taking talent away from these Web 2.0 companies. What's wrong with you guys? And it was a kind of a culture shock to see Palantir on the cover of Time magazine last month. Maybe, I guess, because of Ukraine or something, people finally appreciate some of this. But listen, I mean, defense is a very important thing for our country. There are bad guys in the world. The bad guys will get away with things if they think they can beat us. We have to stay stronger than them. The way you have peace in the world is you have a strong America that doesn't let these guys get away with nonsense, doesn't let these guys defeat us. And unfortunately, over the last 25 years, a lot of the defense primes in the US, these are very, very large companies. They were very impressive companies throughout the 20th century, and they've really kind of fallen really dramatically. And we call it innovation theater, but their incentives, being these giant kind of government contractors, were to basically pretend they're able to innovate for the government to keep giving them money, but without any kind of tests or any kind of accountability on if they're actually innovating. And one thing we do in Silicon Valley is we try to attract top talent. That's one of the big ways we invest and build companies is what are the very best engineers in the world doing. And we track about 5,000 engineers, the different systems. We all have different ways of doing it. And you can map this out, and basically none of those best engineers have been going into the top primes for the last 20 years. Maybe some good PhDs in certain areas, but like definitely not on the computer science side. And when they do go there, they usually leave right away. They reject the culture. They can't work with it. And that's frankly terrifying. And I was just to give a context, I was pretty optimistic on China 15 years ago. I thought China was going the right direction. We were trying to do some things there. And unfortunately, it became really clear that this Xi Jinping guy is actually a communist. He's actually an insane murderer who's killed a lot of my friends and destroyed a lot of their tech sector. And he actually is someone who, these guys, his mom turned him in when he was a kid. These guys, he's seriously mentally ill. Like, we don't talk about this enough. And he basically, he's killed so many people. And he basically used to sing these poems in his youth with the Maoist youth, talking about hardening your heart against the destruction of America. Like this, you guys can say whatever you want about Biden and Trump. Like, this is a whole nother level of a problematic person. And when we realized, A, you should not be doing anything in China as a tech investor and from America, right around 2014, 2015, it became obvious. And B, hold on a second, these crazy guys are forcing their best and brightest into the PLA, into the army in China. They are building really advanced things that they're starting to compete with the US. And by the way, the US defense primes suck. That became a very scary realization to us about 10 years ago. So we went hard into defense. Obviously, Palmer, who we backed at Oculus, started Anduril with 3 of my former Palantir colleagues. We started, it was a great company. We're a proud early investor. We started Epirus, the world's leading EMP company now. We could turn off electronics. I'm not allowed to say how far away, but very far away. You can just shoot blast of microwave radiation, turn them off. We're starting, in the last several years, AI companies to teach the Navy how to build thousands of drones and weaponize them. And so we basically went hard into defense because, frankly, it was necessary. And it was really scary to us to see Google pulling out. And Google, which is not a pro-American company, it's a very kind of weird globalist, anti-American company. Google basically said, we're not going to do defense anymore. And that was terrifying. Because if you see China doing this, you see a crazy guy in charge who wants to fight us. The way that you keep peace and not have war with China is you make sure we stay stronger. And that wasn't clear it was going to happen. So I'm really glad to see a lot of really great talent, especially here in LA, getting back into defense, kind of helping us fight for America.
And you mentioned Google there, so let's double click for a second, right?
Well, we all saw Google last week with Gemini. It's like that's kind of classic. It's like you can't really hide your ideology when you build it into the AI and let people talk to it.
So and you mentioned backstage you were telling me you when you started your career you were looking at IBM and how to disassemble it and attack it. Is Google the new IBM?
Google still has a monopoly that's harder to attack. So IBM had all these different areas where they were doing third-tier work, and we built all these different SaaS companies that basically just ripped away all these areas from IBM because it turned out really great, cloud SaaS companies could just do everything better in these industries. And so we basically took away all that business from IBM. I think the equivalent now might be something like a Raytheon, which is still good in a few areas, but a lot of their areas, we basically have new companies starting up that are competing against them that are going to rip away a lot of that kind of business. Google is run by the woke mind virus. It has some core of talents. It has probably tens of thousands of people it doesn't need who are not tied to making money. They have to pretend they're doing other things because otherwise they get more in trouble for their monopoly, which you could probably run with a handful of people. I mean, probably need 1,000 people, probably not 100,000 people. And my favorite Google one from the Gemini thing last week, there's a lot of them if you go online. I think they only got in trouble for this because when somebody asked it to generate images of Nazi soldiers from the 1930s, it would obviously generate them in a more diverse way. So you had these Han Chinese women and Native Americans in Nazi gear, and that, of course, finally pissed off the left enough to go after Google, attributing Nazi crimes to these diverse people.
And
this is the whole. You can't make it up.
Yeah,
it's hilarious.
If you haven't gone and searched for some of these Gemini responses, it's worth a look.
The other one, which to me is just so classic. It's should we ban the New York Times? Should we ban the Washington Post? No, of course you should not ban that. We have a First Amendment, which just gives them the right to publish what they want, and you can't stop them from doing that. Should we ban the Washington Times? Should we ban this conservative paper? Well, yes, I agree. These are very troubled things, and people are torn on whether or not they should be banned. That's literally the answer out of this thing. So it's clearly ideologically weaponized, and Google search has been this way for a long time. You just haven't seen it as clearly as you have now that they try to make an interactive AI. So listen, I don't think companies should be conservative. I think I'd be fighting them if they were conservative, but I think it's BS to have this thing that everyone uses for the world's information, to have this crazy ideological bent that's not healthy for our country. And what it does is it systematically causes you to miss things if everyone's biased on one side, because you need to have both perspectives in order to be able to figure out the truth in the world.
And you mentioned the Raytheon and there's like the Boeings of the world. These are enormous companies, big defense contracts.
They have so much lock-in that they've gone woke as well. So I don't even care so much about the woke stuff. What happens is when you have a monopoly, when you have something where they're not being held accountable, you can't really spend your time. You're not fighting. There's nothing that's making you fit. There's nothing that's forcing you to be fit. So you have all these extra people, and then they have to virtue signal. And so they're going to virtue signal with whatever virtue signaling is of our time. So if in our society virtue signaling was on the right, they'd be doing stupid things on the right. Right now in our society, they do stupid things on the left. But either way, it's kind of like an indicator of how broken they are, that they're not being forced to stay fit.
And with all that lock-in, right, with the big government contracts, how do you attack that as an entrepreneur, as an investor, as a founder? What do you?
No, I mean building. So Palantir, I don't know if it's valued correctly or not. It's a great company. It's valued over $50 billion now. This thing took a long time to build. It would be very, very persistent early on, and basically, you have to shame the government into something's 10 times better. Like when you're trying to go into the government, we don't have the same contacts. We don't have the hundreds of lobbyists. We don't play golf with the right people. We haven't hung out with these guys for 30 years. It's very dangerous. It's very safe to buy IBM or Raytheon. So what do you have to do? You have to basically keep showing up. You have to keep iterating, and you have to be so good that it's just basically shameful not to work with you. And you know what you find is that government employees, it's very volatile what their skill level is. You'll have some people who are very lazy and bureaucratic, but you'll have amazing people. In OpenGov, I think it's almost in 2,000 governments, and you have in every one of these cities, municipalities, school districts, you very often have an amazing person there who wants to do their job well, and you ally with these people and you find them, and they really take a risk and fight for you. And that's a great thing about America is even in these places that don't always pay that well and don't always have the best cultures, you will have great people and you'll partner, and you ultimately have to just shame everyone else that this is obviously better, guys. And so it's a very high bar to get in.
Shame as a tactic, I like it.
I know you gotta do what you can to break into these things.
So OpenGov, Palantir, those are decade ripened fruit for you. Newer initiative, the University of Austin. I'm not sure if everyone in the audience is as familiar with it, but also talk about going up against some new Goliaths.
Speaking of cartels, so we're starting a new university. Barry Weiss and Neil Ferguson are my co-founders, and I for some reason agreed to be the chairman of the board of this new thing that we started together. And so our goal is to compete with Harvard, Stanford, Yale. We're recruiting our first class right now. We have amazing students who are turning down those schools. We're going to have 100 students in all. We had 5,000 professors apply when we announced this school, and the reason we had 5,000 professors apply, not partially because Barry and Neil are so amazing, much cooler than me, but partially because these schools, people are under attack. Free thinking is under attack. Pursuit of the truth is under attack. If you speak out, I was on the phone yesterday with my friend Roland Fryer. He's an African-American man who was born born in poverty and worked his way up and got tenure at Harvard, extraordinary man, and he's published all sorts of fascinating things in economics, one of the great thinkers of our time, in my view. And he published something showing that police use of force was, the interdictions were slightly biased against black people, but the use of force was not biased against black people. And that answer in today's Harvard was unacceptable. And at the time, Claudine Gay, who was running whatever kind of woke internal thing, this is long before she was president, went after him and helped him get attacked for 2 years and had to step aside for 2 years. You get penalized and attacked for publishing something that doesn't go along with the woke narrative in these schools. So you have all these professors who are not able to pursue truth, who are not able to do things based on data, and they're terrified. And this is not people on the right. I don't even think he's on the right. He's the moderate guy. There's a lot of people on the moderate left applying because they're trying to escape crazy progressives who have lost their minds.
And so how is going up against Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Stanford, these are enormous institutions, enormous amounts of money. You guys got to come in here, starting a total greenfield, university. How's it going? What's happening?
We've raised $250 million. We have dozens of major supporters. We're getting great students. We've had these seminars where we've had thousands of students from the very top schools all applying to come and join, and just telling us when they experience them. It's even cooler than anything they did at Harvard or Stanford. We're getting really, really great kids. And the goal, listen, we're not gonna be able to fix the whole thing, But the goal is to put pressure on these schools, and we're doing that. Like if you go to talk to a lot of presidents of a lot of universities, like, yeah, our board spends more time talking about you guys are doing than what we're doing, and they're pushing them because these schools, it's not just that the professors are crazy. It's that there's like, Yale has more administrators than students now. Harvard has almost as many administrators than students, and these administrators are, as a rule, far to the extreme radical left versus the professors even, and they've taken over the campus. It's that the legal culture is very risk averse. It's just all these things are broken at these places, and so they need competition. And you could not have started a top new university 20 years ago. I was at Stanford. A lot of people here went to a lot of great schools. Like these schools could not have really been challenged 20 years ago. They are being challenged now. We are able to recruit away top kids now because people are seeing how broken they are, and I hope our example will help improve them.
And I was, at a dinner about University of Austin recently, and actually one of the most fascinating things I thought was the governance structure around making sure that this is built to last. I was curious if you maybe talk about that for a little bit.
I'm a big fan of constitutional law and how we need checks on power in our country. Like the broken parts are the unchecked things like the regulatory state that are against how our founders set it up. And so if you go back, like how do you build a constitution for a university? And Neil Ferguson, of course, is one of the great historians alive, and he did a lot of work on this. And the long story short, you want different branches of power, and you actually want some kind of judicial system. And what you find in all these universities is they have certain principles, but people go and lobby the boards, and the boards basically break down and go along. And what you need is the board to be able to appeal to a judicial thing that actually makes a decision. And you can say as a board, I'm sorry, I agree, that seemed hateful to me, but we're not allowed to violate this kind of freedom of speech. And so I think you basically, if you have a board that can appeal to a judicial system, it actually is a much safer way to keep your principles.
Super cool. I've heard other universities now trying to learn and copy, and
there's a lot of them who are doing that based on that. But and this is also what makes me hopeful. If we could just have even just 5 or 10% of us who are willing to speak out boldly and call things out that are wrong and say, I'm sorry, that DEI initiative sounds really good, but it's actually going to create more racism, and it's actually going to hurt merit, and it's bad for these reasons. If you just teach even 5 or 10% in our companies to start doing that, I think you basically can shift things back in a much more functional direction. I think everyone's just been cowed and silent against things that are obviously wrong, and so we just need a small number of the students who are graduating amongst our top companies who are building these things, and even that small amount could really shift the conversation in a healthy direction. So I'm excited what we're doing.
You're clearly someone who doesn't, hold back his opinions, willing to share them. Part of the, right? Yeah. Part of the topic today is building with courage. And, I know there's this kind of long-standing debate within the tech community. Should we take on issues? We had Brian Armstrong, Coinbase, our mission is crypto. We're not going to talk about anything else. Then we have tons of companies, maybe virtue signaling or taking stands in other ways. You wear it on your sleeve. I'm just curious, how do you advise your companies? Are you a role model for how people should operate?
Well, I'm
being courageous.
Listen, I am fighting for my values and my principles, but I spoke to a group like this of about 300 young kids who are on the more conservative libertarian side from the top schools the other day, and a bunch of them are like, you don't want to work with the liberals or whatever. Like, guys, that's ridiculous. First of all, you're never going to have any good company if you don't work with both sides, especially if you're on the right. That's stupid. And second of all, that's not what we're going for. Like the whole point of University of Austin is to have a liberal society versus an illiberal society. And what that means is that America is a pluralistic society where we all have different views and we all work together. I am perfectly fine to have even communists in my companies. I mean, a little uncomfortable with the communists, but I'm willing to do that because that is what a plural society is that we all work together even though we disagree. And I think the point of the thing at Coinbase is not that we should all have the same, not that we all should all have the same views. It's just that at Coinbase we're working on Coinbase, and at Palantir we're working on Palantir, and at our fund we're working on our fund. A lot of my partners have different politics than me. I think it'd be a big failure for the university not to have people on both sides. It'd be a big failure for my companies not to have everyone on both sides. But the point is we're not demonizing, right? I think that's the goal. So I think I respect people who have clear values and principles. I don't respect it if you're trying to censor people or not work with people based on that. I think that's the whole point.
Very cool. A few weeks ago, you had an op-ed running in the Wall Street Journal.
On Thursday, yeah.
Okay, it was even more recent.
Jeb Bush and I did this one.
Co-signed with Jeb Bush, specifically, looking at the rule of law being imperiled in the U.S. And highlighting.
This is going to offend everyone. We should talk about it. That's good. All right, so
let's go in there.
All right.
Right.
Well, listen. You can probably guess how Jeb's not a huge fan of Donald Trump. I'm pretty close to Elon, and I see a lot of these things going on. And it's obvious to everyone, even people who don't like him, who are around him, that the government was weaponized against him, that all these regulators all started coming at him, all started delaying things. There's just a lot of activists, basically, however you look at it. Some people say it's coordinated deep state. Some of it might be. But it's very obvious that they're all at once going after him, pretty much every agency. And it's because he spoke up and because he's become a target for his politics and his views. And that's, I think if you can't admit that to yourself, I think you're lost, basically. And then, listen, it's a similar thing with Trump. And did Trump oftentimes do things wrong or in sloppy ways? He's obviously sloppy. It's embarrassing, frankly. And he's obviously a narcissist, and he obviously has lots of issues. I mean, but like I know a lot of developers who don't like him, and frankly, they don't like him a lot of times because they work with him. But they see this ruling in New York, and they say, obviously, that's wrong. It's one thing. This law, first of all, the 1950s, has never been used against someone without victims. Now, by law, it can be. But secondly, there's dozens of other developers who all do this. They all say this thing's worth more than it is, and the bank does its own analysis. The bank was happy. It was normal. And third, even if you finally want to penalize him for this, after all, penalizing him $355 million or $400 million or whatever it is, it's obviously a political ploy to attack him. And listen, I respect if you think you're saving our country and that's what you're doing, but you should be honest. That's what you're doing. You're weaponizing the court because you really hate him and think he's a big danger. And that's something that Jeb Bush and I both, even though Jeb especially doesn't like him, is saying that's not how our country works. Because guess what? If you do this to him, it's going to be done to other people the other way around in a red state, and it's going to keep going. And that's how we spiral down, and that's how we become a third world country if we don't have a court system.
So if we agree, rule of law is imperiled, is that something that, as an entrepreneur you can attack? As a technology, is there a role for technology in that?
In this case, I think personnel is policy. I think it's really hard to have AI running our court systems. I'd be pretty scared of that too, especially if Gemini is in charge. But in general, personnel is policy, and in general, I do think it's our duty as entrepreneurs. And Jeb wrote this as a businessman as well, to speak up. I think it's a duty of more people to speak up if you see it this way, because basically we get to decide what states our companies work in. And if Delaware is going to do this regularly, that's not a place we're going to want to base things anymore. And so, yeah, I think the number one thing here is even if you don't, especially if you don't like someone, the reason America is great and the reason it's an exceptional country is we do have equal justice under the law, and therefore it is our duty to speak up.
You mentioned the phrase "the woke mind virus," a couple times here. Assuming people understand what that is it on the retreat? Is it on? Is it progressing still? Like, where are we in this? And you're clearly a warrior against it, right? Like, where are we in this
Richard Dawkins
battle?
coined this. Elon's talked about it a lot. I think it's unfortunate how it's seen sometimes, because I think it really shouldn't be a left-right thing. I think that a lot of people on the left have a lot of values and views I admire, but I think the core of the left is supposed to be about a liberal society. And the woke mind virus is something that's illiberal. It's something that's very much comes from like a Maoist China sort of energy and sort of shame and sort of way of attacking things. It was, ended up killing tens of millions of people there, and it's a very, very dangerous thing. And you listen, I think it's still in our institutions in charge, and it's winning, but it's winning by a lot less. And I think the key thing I'd say for people is it's very easy to picture society as like it's a pendulum, and the pendulum's swinging back, and it's like this thing that just swings, and it's going to swing back. And actually, no, the way it works is you have to fight. And the question is, what have you done to fight against something that you know is wrong with this? What have you done to show courage and to speak up and say, listen, guys, this is not right. We all know it's not right. We all know it's causing problems. It sounded good at the time in 2016 that we were going to do this because everyone else was doing it. And here's why it doesn't make sense. Here's why we're going to have to push back. Here's why we have to change it to something that is more based on merit and is more based on logic and more based on competence. And the question is, like, where have you shown courage in your life and done this? And if each of you are not showing that courage and doing it, then the bad guys are going to keep winning.
That sounds like a call to action. We'll end on that note. Thank you, Joe. This was great.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.